Hey everyone, Frank with ICH Performance, and today we are going to install the all-new QSE shock system on a Skidoo Gen 5 and walk you through all the steps for install, wiring, how to place that and route it through your machine, and all the necessary details you need to know to install this QSE kit. This is the easier part, putting the shocks in, and luckily the wiring harness that's provided is pretty straightforward. You just need to route it in a specific way through your snowmobile, and a few tips on mounting the button to the bars. Otherwise, pretty straightforward. You can do it in your shop in just a couple of hours. This is pretty much everything you'll receive besides the shocks, obviously. You have your wire protector to run up the torque arm, the bag of hardware here with grommets and provided zip ties as well. And this is the complete harness, and it truly is a plug and play system. There's no wiring that's gonna stress you out when you open the box. It's very straightforward. All you need to know is basically where to route it and where to plug this connector into to gain power. And then you have your switch here, and then the plug that goes into the rear track shock so you can control it from the bars. Now we have the suspension back up on the workbench here, and we've removed part of the wiring harness. This is the piece that's gonna go in the skid, and then this end here will go up through the tunnel into the hole that we're going to drill later. But just starting with this, here, I'm gonna take this end with the orange cap there, put it into the shock until you hear an audible snap, then take a zip tie and run that through here. Next, we'll route it underneath the front torque arm, just kind of loosely for now, and then take the aluminum sheath here and snap it over the torque arm like so, making sure that the wire stays on the outside of the torque arm here and it isn't routed in any sort of way that can get bound up or frayed. So just make sure it's nested correctly there. So sleds in front of us here, we have the hood and side panels off. We do have to remove the can to gain access to an area in the machine. So just pop this off with the 10 mil, and then take your spring pulling tool and remove all 4 springs. Now we'll take the bolt out that we loosened up just a second ago, take that out, unplug the connector here as well, remove it from the clip, and pull the can kind of out from the snowmobile. Now we have good access to the chain case here, and the reason for that is we are going to attach this piece here to the side of the chain case right there with the provided bolt in the kit. And we're gonna face this end here, which will plug into the harness coming from the skid using a 5mm Allen. Get it nice and snug. Now, this will go right behind here. The wire harness will come through the side of the tunnel, underneath the chain case, and plug into this connector there and be nice and tucked away. Now, we're gonna route the rest of the harness up through, but first, taking the switch that mounts to the bars and just unplug that. It's a little easier to route the harness through the machine when that is not in place. You're gonna come up through by the chain case vent and go behind your fuse box there, and this plug will actually go into the diagnostic port there. And that's nice because if you have other accessories plugged into the Skidoo accessory harness on the other side, you won't have to mess with that. This is always going to be empty, and you can just, if you need to, unplug it if a dealer needs to read any codes. So plug that in there, and we'll take a wire tie and route it through this. There's already a hole in place. Get that snugged up, clip the tail, and with that switch unplugged, we can now take this and route it behind the coolant bottle and fish it up through right next to your factory plug that goes into the hood. Now we have plenty of slack to plug into the switch harness once we mount it on the bars there. So we're up in the cockpit of the snowmobile here and taking the QSE switch, mounting it onto the handlebar. What I personally like to do, and everyone's different, is typically this shot start is closer to the outside of the bars, and throughout the day, I'm not using this a whole lot. Yes, I'll start the machine on and off multiple times, but I never am in a situation where I really need to jump to this super quick to start it. So with that being said, is I take it where it normally is right here, and I push it all the way to the inside, get it snugged up, and leave it right there. And then I'll put the QSE switch right here. And part of the reason for that is I can keep my hand on the grip and toggle it. The nice thing about QSE is you have access to that lockout button, and you can flip it on or off in a situation, you know, at the push of a finger. So having it right there, super accessible, is very nice. Obviously, you can put this wherever you want on the bars, assuming there's room, but I personally like it right there. It makes the most sense to me. Making sure you don't pinch any wires in the process. You have your grip heaters, shot start wire, brake, so a couple things that could get caught. Just making sure that you aren't getting anything pinched while mounting this up. And then you can leave it a little bit loose and put it in the desired position, you know, as you're riding, or just sit on the sled in the shop and put it where you'd like. I'm gonna scooch mine a little bit further out just because we have the slack and the wires to do so. Then we're just gonna wire tie it to the brake line, snap it into position here to the wire that we routed up through the sled. Another one here, clip the tags on the wire ties. So we're taking this extra slack here, gonna tuck it up nice, gonna wire tie it here right next to the fuse box. I kind of like to just leave that tucked in there, it doesn't really bother anything. Snip it, turn that to the inside. Same with that. And then I just like to put one more right on this vent of the chain case, loosely. That way it doesn't want to jump around. And so now we're all wired up. Everything's looking nice and tidy. This, again, just kind of tucks right in there, but you can get your side panel on nice and everything looks factory. One final thing with routing the wires is give your bars a turn and make sure nothing is getting bound up. The way that we route it, like we showed you, nothing should be getting tight, but just double check, make sure nothing's getting caught in there. Next up, we're gonna drill a hole in the side of the tunnel to route the QSE wire through. And you're gonna wanna refer to the FOX manual for this to make sure you are drilling in the right location. Again, the saying here rings true, measure twice, cut once. And they'll have nice images and measurements to be sure you are drilling in the right location. But generally, from the center of the front torque arm hole forward, it's about 2 3/4 of an inch, and then 1.5 inches up from the running board. You can see we already made a little dot there where we are going to drill. Start with a pilot hole first, and then drill it out to 3/4 of an inch. So now we're set to go. We can put the wire harness through that and finish routing it. So we got the sled back up on its feet now. Skid is installed in the sled, tightened up, and as you can see, the wire that we installed on the rear suspension earlier is just hanging out here. Make sure you don't pinch this when you're putting things back together. But we're gonna take that with the grommet we have installed and just route it through. Pull it on through, and we have plenty of slack to run it underneath the chain case. We will need to take this 10mm bolt out of the chain case. So you run the wire through that clamp like so, put the bolt through there, and that helps keep it tucked out of the way. That way your feet don't get in contact with the wire. And as you're getting it snug, just hold it in place and make sure it doesn't spin clockwise as you're getting it tighter. I've actually found these chain case bolts to be a little bit fragile as they go in, so using a hand tool is always recommended for those. Now take the wire and run it underneath the chain case. It'll find its home there, and connect it to the other piece that we routed earlier where we bolted it to the side of the chain case. I like to put it behind this speed sensor wire, and that way it keeps it away as much as possible from the exhaust. And go ahead and plug that in until you hear that audible snap. Make sure it's connected, and we're gonna throw a wire tie around that just to keep it in place. So that completes the install of the QSE. We have our skid suspension in, everything is routed correctly and wire tied nicely out of the way so it looks factory and nothing is gonna get caught or bound up with the suspension or the steering. Pretty straightforward, but if you have any questions with the install, don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to walk you through, or if you want to send us photos to confirm fitment or placement of the wires, please do so. We'd rather that than have you run into trouble. But now we're gonna get the sled buttoned up, put the can back in, hood and side panels, and we're gonna go ride this thing and check out the QSE.